All right. Well, welcome everyone to December's BayCare Presents. So glad that you can join us here today. As I mentioned earlier, this is kind of a passion project for me. I love the fact that I've had the opportunity over the years to kind of study and learn about this. By education, I am an exercise physiologist and a clinical health coach. And I started my career as a strength and conditioning coach. In fact, I was a strength and conditioning coach for the University of Missouri. So I got to work with all those young athletes and try and do that. Just make them be stronger. I worked on strength and conditioning. So that's what I focused on. But I found that I was in the field longer and longer. I realized that there was so much more to what people were looking for, and so much more that was influencing their body. Even if I wanted to help them be stronger and better conditioned, if I could impact their mind and their spirit, I was going to make a bigger impact on their overall well being. And as I moved into other fields within the health and wellness world, I started to see the big impact that it has on just our overall health in general. So we want to kind of think about focus on the physical aspects of health and wellness, but we want to see how the mental health is just as important, if not even more important. Because the mind and the spirit have a significant impact on our overall well being, and especially when we impact the tangible aspects of our physical health. When we look at the power of the triadox of the mind, the body, and the spirit, it is so foundational to every aspect of who we are. And if we're paying close attention, we can see over and over again how the mind, the body, and the spirit have the ability to influence each other. Any one of these pieces can create a big impact on the other pieces. The physical, the body piece, is just 1/3 of the picture. We need to make sure we're tapping into that other 2/3 in order to make sure we're enhancing the interaction of our overall well-being. Visualization, I like to kind of our story I like to say about this is years ago, I as an exercise physiologist, I was working with someone who had MS. And her physical body just did not want to respond. And she was having a lot of problems with that. But when I changed my focus and I started attacking her positivity, her emotional well being, uplifting her, it was surprising for me to see how the change in her body happened. She was able to do movements that she had always told me, no, I can't do that. No, I don't want to try that. She had more positivity. Her body moved better. And we were actually able to improve the strength of her muscles. We were able to improve her range of motion and her ability to function overall. So I knew there had to be something even deeper going on there. So I really love how the brain, how the spirit, how the mind all affect our overall well being. So I want to take a quick picture of what's going on because stress and anxiety and pain can trigger this cascade of stress hormones that produce this well-orchestrated physiological changes within our body. This reaction a lot of times is known as the fight or flight response. Our heart rate goes up, our respiration increases. There's a carefully orchestrated yet nearly instantaneous sequence of hormone changes and physiological responses. And they're there so that we can help to fight off a threat, flee safety, or freeze because we don't know what to do. Unfortunately, most of the time, our body can also overreact to stressors. And that's how we kind of live our lives a lot of times. Things that are not life threatening, like traffic jams, work pressures, family difficulties, stress of the holidays, discomfort, pain, all of these perceived threats are just as difficult to the body as real stressors. So it's not to discount them at all, but the fight or flight syndrome was there to help us to be able to shut everything down so that we just were able to take care of the threat. So when we perceive that threat, it opens the floodgate of cortisol and other stress hormones, and it floods the brain. So it shuts down all other neurological receptors that are not needed in that fight or flight. So I've got no rational thought going on there, no creativity, no logic, no imagination, just danger, danger, danger. But it also sends those stress hormones throughout my whole physical body. So beyond the mental shutdown that I'm having, I'm creating a lot of real responses within my physical body. And that can cause a lot of havoc to our body if it's continually done. And as I said, we a lot of times will go into that fight or flight syndrome, even when it's not a real danger that we need to run from, but it's someone who cut us off, or we're annoyed at something, or I had a terrible phone call, or something wasn't working out my way. So we're going to take a quick little view of how we walk through the brain. So you'll notice in the lower portion of the brain there, the amygdala. And the amygdala is where the first thought comes into the brain. And this is where we have our first response. And if I'm in that knee-jerk reaction type thing, my body goes into what's called an amygdala hijack. And it's going to say, threat, 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 danger, danger, danger. And it's going to release a whole lot of cortisol. That cortisol is going to flood over my brain, shut everything down to get me ready for that fight or flight. But when that happens, I can't respond well. I don't know what's going on. So I kind of stay in this perpetual anxiety driven kind of space. If we can have strategies that allow us to pause before that cortisol gets released, that thought then gets to go to my limbic system. The limbic system in the middle of the brain is where I can understand feelings. This is where I can start naming what's going on, where I can kind of understand what is happening. A lot of times we'll say we're angry. Well, anger in the psychological world is a very violent, very hot, very red, intense emotion. And very few people are truly at the angry level. A lot of times we're just a little bit below that. We're frustrated, we're annoyed, we're hungry, hangry, we're bored, we're feel guilty. There's a whole lot of host of things that we can be feeling. But once we can name what we're feeling, that allows us to get to the front of the brain, which is where our prefrontal cortex is. And this is where we have rational thought. And this is where we can then come up with better judgments, better thought processes, better strategies as to what to deal with it. So as we have this process going on through the brain, we also have a whole lot of stuff that's going on through the body. But we need to kind of take a moment and pause because there's a space. And that space between the stimulus of what caused us to kind of have a reaction and the actual response that we have, that space is where we have the power to choose. Because in life, everything is a choice. We don't have to, need to, or should do anything. We can choose our responses because we get to choose our actions, we get to choose our words, and we get to choose our thoughts. We're in control of that. So we need to come up with those strategies that are going to help us to control how we act, what we say, and how we feel, because all of that is going to create a response within our physical body. So those emotions we were talking about. Talked about needing to name our stressors. And there's a whole host of emotions, and I've listed a bunch of them up here on the screen. And, by no means is this a complete list. This is just something that a lot of us seem to hit in the course of the day. And they take a toll on us. They cause fatigue, they cause frustration, and they're damaging our internal organs. Sometimes they cause us to fly off the handle a little sooner, or maybe don't do things as we might have done it, or maybe we're not doing the self-care we need for ourselves because we're feeling so depressed or so fatigued and nervous and confused that we're just kind of shut down completely. But there's a lot more going on here than just that short-term emotional, and in some cases, long-term emotional response. So by understanding our feelings, we're not only working on improving our overall emotional well-being and being able to maybe slow down that fight or flight kind of amygdala hijack, but we're also going to be able to affect the stress response that's going on in our body physically. And in this image here, kind of just shows a little bit of a flow what's going on. Researchers have learned that we understand why these reactions occur, but we also are starting to gain a lot of insight on the long-term effects of chronic stress on our body, on both our physical and our psychological health. Chronic stress contributes to high blood pressure. It promotes the formation of artery clogging deposits, which lead to heart disease. It creates changes in our brain, actually changing the synapses and the pathways of our brain that contribute to more anxiety, depression, and even addiction. Research suggests that chronic stress can contribute to obesity. And this is through the direct mechanism of when people are stressed, they tend to just shove more food into their mouth and not think about what they're eating. But also indirectly, it's causing a decrease in sleep, which is causing our body not to be able to function correctly. It's causing us to maybe not get as much movement and exercise in our day. It's releasing all that cortisol into our system, which we talked about how it shuts down the brain. But in our body, it also inhibits our body to lose weight. When we have a lot of cortisol flowing through the system, the body goes into a fat conserving mode where it actually holds on to fat molecules where it's not going to let them go. So now my body is holding on to that fat, and now I have a higher chance of obesity. The inability to clear out these hormones so that they stay elevated, as I said, it leads to that high blood pressure. That high blood pressure increases my pupil dilation, increases the blood sugar I have in my system. It's a higher risk of insulin resistance, and insulin resistance is just another way of saying type 2 diabetes. With the blood sugar, with the blood pressure changes, think about that pressure increasing as the blood is flowing through your system. You generally want the blood to be able to circulate through the system so it can carry nutrients and oxygen to all the working parts of the brain and the muscles and all of our extremities. And it's going, say, like at a garden hose pace. It's being able to pump through and move everything through as it cleans out waste products. When my pressure increases, what happens is the pressure that it's going through the system is changing from a garden hose to a fire hose. So now I have this high pressure coming through all of my delicate little veins and arteries and capillaries, and it can cause a lot of damage as that pressure is going through there. That's why high blood pressure is often called the silent killer. It's creating all of this damage, but you don't necessarily feel it. And you think about all the delicate capillaries in your eyes, in your kidneys, in your heart, we're causing a lot of stress and creating weakness in the walls there that can lead to a lot of other issues going on. And then we have that increase in blood sugar, the higher risk of type 2 diabetes. When we're having higher blood sugar, think about it as if there's, and this is not exactly what it is, but it's as if there's sand in your blood. So it's coarse, like having sandpaper. So now this higher pressure of blood that's going through the system has a gritty consistency to it. So now that is going against the walls of things and creating damage of the walls. So it's creating little rough spots, which allows plaque to get stuck or make the walls thinner, which allows there to maybe be a burst or some other damage that can come on. But if nothing else, it's just creating this sandy effect in our veins, arteries, and capillaries, which is damaging the walls. So it's increasing our chance of having heart disease, strokes. Also, it increases our chances of having some different types of cancers. So we want to make sure that we're understanding what's going on here. As the brain gets these responses, it creates a real physiological response in the body. The pituitary gland sends a message, and then I'm going to be sending out from the adrenal glands that cortisol and that adrenaline. As it hits the blood system, I now am slowing down my digestion. I have a little bit of gut mobility issues. So my digestive system is not working the way it should. I might be feeling a little bit more bloated. I might have a little bit more abdominal pain. My body is not necessarily pulling all the nutrients I need from the food I'm eating, and it slows down. And I might have some gastric distress. It can create some issues with your vision. Some people actually get a tunnel vision going on. If you've ever had a migraine and you've kind of lost your peripheral vision and it comes in, it's kind of like that thought. But just that pressure can cause some damage to the capillaries and all the delicate structures within our eyes. It's going to increase our heart rate. So we're having a more rapid heart rate. So our heart is having to work harder to do the same amount of work. So we're just fatiguing our system beyond having all that extra pressure and grit within the system. Increase that respiration aspect. So we're breathing deeper, and we're usually breathing way up in our chest too. So we're not getting that oxygen deep into our lungs. So we're keeping a lot of the waste products there and not being able to expel them because I'm taking much shorter, more rapid breaths and breathing up in the chest. Because I'm not getting that great circulation, I might have some increased sweating or increased swelling also. So my body may be trying to get rid of some of the heat and the excessive by sweating more, and it might be holding on to some more fluids where maybe your ankles or your hands are feeling a little swollen. We talked about that high blood pressure, and then that insulin resistance is where our liver is not functioning quite the way they can. So with all of that, I have all of these physiological responses that occur. And again, these are not the end all be all of everything here, but this list is showing you that, these reactions occur, that high blood pressure is happening, it's damaging the body. I may have more muscle tension. I may hold that tension, which could be leading to more headaches, or maybe I'm having more low back pains and more fatigue in my body. We talked about that upset stomach. It's going to weaken your immune system. It's going to leave us open to be able to pick up other little germs that are around us because we're not taking care of our body. That fatigue, even though we're tired, we may not be sleeping well. And sleep affects every molecule of our body. So when we're having this stress response, it creates this vicious cycle of other things that are going to affect our overall health and well-being. We talked about maybe you're not exercising as much, moving, but you're probably not sleeping as well. And sleeping is the time where our body restores. It's what allows us to reset our blood pressure, to decrease our blood sugar and bring us back to a baseline, as well as help us to deal with all the stresses we have during the day. And when I'm not getting that sleep, I'm just affecting that a little bit more. So we want to make sure we're understanding that. And we want to look at the happy chemistry. We talked about the cortisol and how the cortisol can weigh us down. We want to do things that are going to help to promote the positive chemistry. We want to incorporate that in. And one of the big one is oxytocin. And what that does, it's a bonding hormone. You know, when a mom has a new baby and they bond, that chemical gets released into our body. When you see your pet, or you have, you take care of your pet, or you give someone a hug, all of that creates this release of oxytocin. And what it is a natural reducer of blood pressure. It helps to increase our tolerance of pain, and it helps to reduce anxiety. And how we get this is by interaction with human beings. We get this by physical touch, by giving back to someone, by volunteering. All of that is such a positive way to release these positive hormones in our body, which helps to retrain the brain also. And then it helps us with when we socialize and have relationships. We also have our serotonin levels, another feel-good hormone that has a long-term effect. And this happens when we have a shared experience with someone. Again, those volunteer times do this. But when we're exposed to nature and when we get out in the sunlight, these are ways that we can up our serotonin levels, and it helps to reduce our levels of depression, helps to kind of balance out some of the negative things going on out there. Being mindful, being aware of what's going on. I always like to say the word mindfulness gets overused a lot. People kind of dismiss it now, but mindful just means being present in the moment and not thinking about what ifs and everything else going around, but being aware of what's going on right now and what you need to be taking care of at this time. The next one is dopamine, and this one we got to be a little careful with because dopamine is the reward chemical. This has shorter term effects, and this is one of those chemicals that can lead to a little bit of an addiction issue. So it might be that you get that immediate gratification with dopamine. So it's when I eat something and it tastes so good that I want to go eat that again, or when I have something pleasurable, I kind of want it again and again. And that's not a bad thing because when we're getting enough sleep, this happens. When we're enjoying nice things, when we're doing something relaxing, all of that happens. But it's something that is more temporary or a quick fix as opposed to the serotonin and oxytocin, which have a longer term response on me. And then the last one I wanted to talk about was endorphins. So all four of these have just great benefits on you. Endorphins, we tend to hear about like a runner's high when you exercise and you get that feeling of that release of chemicals and you just feel good. It just is a natural lift. It just kind of elevates your mood. Laughing is another thing that happens there. Laughter is a great way to release these positive hormones and get rid of stress. And people kind of joke at that, but there's actually a study in psychology where they have people just make themselves laugh. So it's not that it even has to be funny. Just the action of doing a laugh creates a certain musculature that happens and triggers a response in the brain that releases this endorphins into your body. So that's why it's so important that we find a way to laugh every day. Whether sometimes we need to laugh at ourselves because it's just silly or something that's going on, or watching your pet or your children or something with a friend, just to create that happiness moment, because endorphins are something that's going to help to make you feel better. It decreases our sensitivity to pain, so we don't necessarily feel pain quite so easily. If we have some chronic pain, it helps to kind of decrease that stress on us when we're getting those endorphins in our body that we're not so sensitive to it. So we're looking at figuring out how do we get a balance between the cortisol and the happy hormones. I only have oxytocin on here because that's the picture I could find, but it is all of those happy hormones. Neither one of them is something you want so much of that there's no balance between it, because having some cortisol in your system is important. That's why our body releases it. But it's finding a balance so that I'm not always just doing things that are creating stress in my life, or I'm not again going after just the highs, but I'm finding that balance so that I can respond and act the way I should. So everyone is different. I think this is a key to understanding how we're going to deal with this, because we just talked about what it does for you, but now what are you personally going to do to help to improve your own mental and physical well-being? And you need to understand that there is no one size fits all. Everyone responds differently. So we need to figure out how to create unique strategies based on our own individuality to find that personal success. First thing I tell people, words are powerful. Think about how we use words and help them to redirect a moment, whether it's me talking to myself with those little voices in my head or me talking to somebody else. In the long run, we can cut off a huge cascade of negative hormones and responses if we create a better environment. If in our head we're giving ourselves some talking to, just say stop and rethink how you're wording things to yourself. We need to think about talking to ourselves as if we are the person we love the most in the world. If you are talking to your favorite grandmother or an aunt or your mom or your dad, that person who you love the most and would never ever think to say a harsh word about, that's how we have to turn around and start talking to ourselves. And sometimes you physically out loud have to say stop and redirect that conversation, because it is creating a negative effect in your body and it is creating a physical response to what's going on. So we need to make sure that if that is something that we're doing, that we are overcoming that we're finding strategies that trigger us to say, let's take a pause here for a second. Let's make sure we're doing things that are going to help to improve our mental well-being. And let's think about the words we use to other people also. Let's be careful in how we say things, that we're giving positive messages to people, that we know that they're there, that we're there to support them, and that we can help them with that. Because everyone responds differently. So we need to do things differently. So beyond our words, we need to figure out how we use this to influence our own self-care as well as the loved ones we have around us. Because self-care is not selfish, it's imperative. We can't help others unless we take care of ourselves. And we all want to be able to influence those around us so that they also get the well-being of that. So we talked about understanding the importance of feelings and emotions and using our words, but we also have to figure out how not to have an amygdala hijack. How do we de-escalate things? And coming as an exercise physiologist, clinical health coach, my number one favorite de-stressing, de-escalating, take a pause moment is breath. It's how do we use our breath? How do we make sure we're going to de-escalate a situation so I have a moment to not allow my brain to get clogged over with cortisol and shut down all neurological function? How can I keep my prefrontal cortex working so that I can come up with the correct strategy for me so I don't start creating this cascade of ill effects to my body? So I'm going to ask you all just to take your hands to the bottom of your rib cage and just place your hands on the bottom, whether you're sitting down or not. If you're sitting, just sit up a little taller so you can get your hands on the bottom of your ribs. Because as I said, most people tend to chest breathe. We want to make sure we're getting the oxygen deep down into our lungs, because when we can get oxygen all the way to the bottom of our lungs, we're going to be able to get rid of all the waste products in our body. We're also going to be able to lower our respiration rate, because we're going to slow our breaths down. And when I'm slowing my breaths down, slowing my respiration down, it creates a decrease in my blood pressure also. So we're going to take 4 mindful breaths. And remember, mindful purely means that I'm going to pay attention to what's going on. I'm going to ask that you breathe in through your nose, because our nose was designed with those little cilia and sinuses that as the air goes in, we're cleaning and warming it as we're coming into our system. And I'm going to ask as you exhale to think about if you can exhale through your nose also, because that helps to slow you down. If for some reason you have some sort of problem with breathing out through your nose, by all means, go ahead and breathe out through your mouth. And we're going to think just about taking 4 breaths together. Because when we do that, we take 20,000 breaths a day. So if I can think anytime I come into a stressful situation, just to pause and take 4 breaths, which take less than a minute, actually takes less than 30 seconds, we're going to be able to decrease anxiety. It's going to help to give me more energy because I'm getting more rich oxygenated blood out to my system. It's going to help my memory, decrease blood pressure, improve focus, but it helps to release tension for me, decrease pain, and increase digestion going on. So I'm going to ask you all now, you want to close your eyes or just relax and take a deep breath in for 4 counts through your nose. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now exhale through your nose for 4, 3, 2, 1. Again, inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale. Feel that oxygen filling up your lungs. Exhale. Feel all the waste products leaving from your body. Last one. Feel that tension release as the air comes in. And now exhale. How did that feel? I'm going to ask you either with the reaction, you give me a thumbs up, you can type in thumbs down or great. But if you're going to chat something, how did that make you feel? You know, you may be experiencing some stress right now, and maybe you're not. Even if you're not feeling stress, usually by taking those 4 mindful breaths, we start to just feel a little bit more relaxed. We feel that oxygen kind of course through your system. I've seen a couple of thumbs come up. That's great. And what we're doing is we're putting into practice a practical way to de-escalate any situation. You know, even when I'm talking to someone, I can stop and pause for a second, take 4 breaths. They're not going to know what I'm doing, but it's going to allow me a moment to say, all right, let me regroup. Let me not allow this to anger me. Let me not allow this to put that cascade of all those negative hormones in my system. Let me clear out some of the waste products going on here. Let me feel a little bit better. Because when I create that pause, it creates a little bit of a distance. It allows me to flood my brain and my system with nutrients and oxygen as opposed to the negative aspects, and gets rid of those waste products and those stress hormones. I love seeing all the happy hands like that. I'm glad you feel good. So even if you weren't under stress, you probably felt good. And if you were under stress, it probably gave you a little bit of a relief. And 4 breaths can be powerful. There's a lot of great information out there that shows you the importance of breath. In fact, I'm reading this really good book right now. It's called Breath by James Nestor, and I'll put it into the notes when I send out the email. But it's talking about even more how taking care of our breath can help our body so much. If you're ever looking for things, there's tons of resources from apps like Calm or YouTube that talk about quality breathing, breathing that can help to wake you up in the morning, but learning how to take advantage of your breath. Because when we do that, we're starting to add in some other benefits to our body. We're taking control of what's going on, and we're allowing our mind, our body, and our spirit to be able to work together. You know, stuff happens in life. The physical body is going to take a brunt of a lot of it. The mental aspect of it is going to happen. But when things happen, if you have strategies that are beneficial to you, you're going to be able to take control. You're going to be able to take control of the impact of your mental health on your physical health. And we have to own that. And we have to model it for those around us so that we can make sure that we're doing things that are going to positively influence our overall well-being. Because we don't want to just take part of a third of it. We want to make sure we're taking care of our whole holistic being. With that being said, I always like to make sure I give people some resources. If you are going under a lot of stress right now, if you are looking for something, there are resources out there to help you. And what it is you can you've had a loss, or maybe you're just having trouble dealing with the situation going on. Almost every company has an EAP program, whether you have benefits or not. It is something that is 100% confidential. They are not allowed to share any information. It is a HIPAA violation, and it is kept completely private if you reach out to the EAP program. The only thing a company ever gets is a check mark of somebody came, not who, not what they talked about, just that somebody did something. And that allows them just to make sure that people are using the service. So you want to make sure you're reaching out to that. If you're having some other issues, maybe you need to be talking to your primary care doctor. Make sure that there's not some other health issues going on that you may need to be checking into. Maybe you need to get with a support group, maybe a grieving group, or maybe you've been going through cancer and you want a cancer support group. There's a lot of different groups out there that can give you that camaraderie and someone to be able to connect with, so you can, be able to not hold everything in. Your clergy, your spiritual leaders, as we're going through this holiday season. This is my dog, our dog Bear, and he is celebrating Christmas, but we wish everyone a happy Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and a happy New Year as we're going into this. But a lot of that brings up stress for people also. So make sure if that is an issue for you, is a trigger for you, that you're reaching out. The 988 number has taken over the 24-hour National Suicide Prevention Hotline. This is when you need someone to talk to immediately. You can call or text them if you don't feel like talking to someone, and texting is easier for you. But you have these resources to reach out to. You have that to take care of, because you need to take care of yourself. And if you're having problems, it's not a weakness to reach out. It's not a weakness at all. We all need other people to help us. Make sure you're surrounding yourself with people who are there for you and who can assist you if you're in any need of that. So hopefully you learned a couple things about how your emotional well-being affects your physical health. And I am going to stop sharing for just a moment, and I'm going to turn the recording off so we can do some question and answer.